Good morning. I know it's been a little bit since I've recorded, but it's a nice quiet morning here for a minute and thought I would quickly record some thoughts. Lately, kind of the thought of clouds has been brought to me in a way. And so, in all my three readings, in some way, I think there's some allusion to the clouds, the idea of clouds. My random reading was in Ezekiel. And I've kind of read that lately, just about the day of the Lord, the day that God shines out. And it may come in clouds, which is kind of interesting, that shining, that God's purpose, that his plan, that his power can come through sort of clouds in a way. So I just wanted to read Ezekiel 30. Let's see, verses, it was at the beginning, yeah, verses 1 and 2. Or actually, maybe start 1, 2, and 3. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, prophesy and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Wail and say, alas for that day, for the day is near. The day of the Lord is near, a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. A sword will come against Egypt, and anguish will come against Cush. When the slain fall in Egypt, her wealth will be carried away, and her foundations torn down. So did you kind of hear that phrase, a day of the Lord, a day of clouds. So we can think, what do clouds do? And, I think of when the Israelites were crossing the Red Sea, and the clouds, in a way, that pillar of clouds actually protected them from the Egyptians being able to see them. The cloud, actually, we'll see in Numbers, God would appear in a cloud, first of all, kind of around the altar, around the Ark of the Covenant, and where the cloud was an understanding of God's presence. And so God sometimes had the Israelites move, and when they were supposed to move, they would see the cloud that was on top of the Ark of the Covenant move, and they were just to follow where the cloud went. And I think that, so clouds for the Israelites meant to direct them, but clouds for people who don't know God, like the Egyptians, can just mean cloudiness, like no direction, like, well, really almost fearful, a cloudiness of like a darkness that can come, and also a cloudiness just of, again, no understanding. And that's what really comes to people who don't have God. So not that if we have God, we have all understanding, but we have enough that we trust in God's understanding, and we have that clarity that God knows. And so even if there's darkness around, or confusion, or clouds, we have the clarity, the peace that God breaks through those clouds. To us, it's really not cloudy ever, in a way, because God's got this. And if we see him clearly, the clouds get dispersed. So I thought that idea there of clouds. And then my final verse was in the Psalms. I'm reading through the Psalms slowly. In Psalm 39, didn't exactly have the phrase clouds, but it talked about people's lives. It kind of relates back to the Ezekiel verse about how short and how fleeting things of this earth are, and temporary. So when it talked about Egypt back in Ezekiel, a lament for Egypt is what the chapter 39 is about. It says, man, you had wealth, and in, like, I think 29 and 31, it just kind of talks about countries or situations where people think they're standing firm, and in a second, everything can be devastated. And so God foresees how that can happen to countries, to people. And he recognizes, so in the Psalms, David is even recognizing, you know what, this is all just for now, just temporary. Made me think of the book of Ecclesiastes, where his son Solomon says, meaningless, everything is meaningless. That when you just look around, you think you might, and my commentary talked about like three things that are like vanity, and vanity is kind of like it's in vain. It's not really of substance, I guess. I didn't look up the word, but Psalms 39 actually uses that word in verse 6. Man is a mere phantom as he goes to and fro. And you might think of the word or the thought of phantom as being like clouds or something that's see-through, which is kind of what clouds are. And right before that, it talks about man's life as but a breath. Again, something that's not really of substance, something that easily comes and goes. My commentary talked about like a rainbow. It's really pretty at first, but it's fleeting. It's not going to be there for any length of time. And so Psalm 39, it's interesting because it talks about David saying, man, I got to watch. I have talked in ways that are foolish or not helpful, and I want to keep my tongue. I want to be patient, probably be self-controlled, self-disciplined, and watch the words that come out of his mouth, which really starts with his heart. And so he did that for a while, he says, but then it says he spoke. And the words he speaks are in verse 4. Show me, O Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting is my life. So that doesn't mean he's saying, God, show me how many days I'm going to live, because none of us really knows that, nor do we need to know that. Instead, he's kind of saying, let me remember that this life is not forever. Let me remember the priorities of living, that anything I see here is things that could be taken away immediately. And then he says, you have made my days a mere handbreadth. And handbreadth, I guess, like the first four of your fingers. And it was like a thing of measurement. And obviously, it's not very big from here to here, depending on your hand. It's not a very big measurement when you think about it. Certainly not even a foot, right? So our lives are just this much. The span of my years is nothing before you, especially compared to eternity. Each man's life is but a breath. So when you think today, you have your worries, you have your plans, you have your fears, you even have your riches and your hopes and your dreams for this world. Remember that they're all just a handbreadth, that none of that is really going to matter in the long run. In eternity, I'm not saying to not make a plan. I'm not saying to be hopeless by any means or not enjoy life, but just remember, don't get caught up in the things that don't really matter in the long run. Each man's life is a breath. Man is a mere phantom as he goes to and fro. He bustles about, but only in vain. He heaps up wealth, not knowing who will get it. And that is kind of what Solomon would say in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. This seems kind of meaningless, that I'm putting all my time and energy into just putting up this stockpile of wealth that won't really be mine in the end. And that doesn't mean not to have, a legacy or not to have a estate or whatever. But ultimately, this world is about us and God. It's about the little bit of time that we get to spend here doing His work, sharing His word, sharing His love. That's what it's all about. So, God forgive me when we get short-sighted into just putting all our attention or thoughts into things that are meaningless, that ultimately don't have substance, that are a breath, and help us to really enjoy the long-term treasure, which is really serving Him and loving Him and loving others. So thank you for listening. Hope you're well.